While we know certainly that college isn't possible for all students in this country, it is certainly something that if you believe in the projections that are being reported by Georgetown University's Center on Education in the Workplace, by 2020, 65% of jobs in this country will require some form of post-secondary education. And quite frankly, lifelong learning. So we do need to be very serious about, again, making sure that young people get into college, but get through college and are really prepared for careers and lifelong learning that will ensure that they are able to compete in a global economy. So today's session is something that we've tried to curate in a way that brings together two tracks at the Ideas Festival. And so what you'll hear us talking about really is this convergence of how we learn, but also innovation by design, because we do think that design thinking plays an important role in designing education solutions that create a personalized and customized experience that isn't a one-size-fits-all, but that can be scalable. And so these panelists, in their own unique right, will be able to share from the sector and the lens that they come at this with, how they've applied design thinking to solutions in their particular communities. I'm going to introduce our panelists because you want to hear more from them than me, and I admire their work. First, starting with Jessie Woolley-Wilson, who is the president and CEO of Dreambox Learning. Jessie has over 20 years of experience in ed tech at K-12 companies like Leapfrog, where she was president of Leapfrog Schoolhouse, and Blackboard, where she was the president of K-12. She serves on many nonprofit boards, but also has served on the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda Council on Technology and Education. Next to Jessie is Wendy Woon, who is the Edward John Noble Foundation Deputy Director of Education at the Museum of Modern Art in New York and has over 30 years of experience in education. MoMA is a really extraordinary place where I've visited many times and hope you all have as well. There she oversees all of the areas of education at the museum and really does focus on interdisciplinary work that looks at design thinking and applying that thinking to not only education but to the overall museum experience. Prior to joining MoMA, she was at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, where I used to live. John Daisy is a warrior for education. Those of you who don't know him, you should. He is the superintendent of the Los Angeles Unified School District, the second largest in the country and one of the most diverse. I think important to note, given the shifting demographics in this country and the large numbers of Latinos, but certainly young people from all backgrounds that he serves. He, prior to that, worked in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in the education portfolio, and again has done a significant amount of work to close the achievement gap, to grow the opportunities for young people and ensure that minority and low-income students are performing at pace with their peers or exceeding where others are performing. So thank you for being with us, John. He was also on a panel this morning on NPR. So he is Superman. He ran from there and joined us here, so we appreciate you. It's about the kids, John. It's about the kids. So we appreciate you being with us. Last but certainly not least, another colleague that I admire tremendously is Sandy Spiker, who is the associate partner at the global design and innovation firm IDEO, where she leads IDEO's education practice. She works with organizations across the public, private, and social sectors, where she and her team really do help create a network of scalable solutions in education, including in countries like Peru, in India, and in the United States. So welcome to all of you. Each of our panelists, as I mentioned, really does approach education from a very different perspective, and that's a part of why we curated this conversation with leaders from very different points of view. But each of them, I think you'll see, will have connections between how they're using technology, the physical space, the digital space, and design thinking principles to impact academic achievement. And so we're going to ask them to provide a brief overview, around 3 minutes or so, of their overall work within that context, and to push us a bit to learn not only about what they're doing, but to share some things that they think are working, but also to share some things that perhaps aren't, and where we could be pushed to do better. And then from there, we'll move into a Q&A and leave room for all of you to ask some questions as well. Sound reasonable? Okay, that's great. In full transparency, I also want to share that while I greatly admire Jessie's work, Target does not currently fund her work, but we do have a partnership at MoMA. We do support LAUSD and have had a partnership and have had a partnership both on the business and societal side with IDEO. So I wanted to put that on the table so that this is not a commercial about what Target is doing, but we do have a relationship that I want you to be aware of. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jesse to share
some work to do.
I think a pitch is coming. Transparency.
So I'm honored to be part of this panel and part of this dialogue. I love coming to Aspen where we really talk about human capital and developing human capital. And I believe that one essential element is first developing someone's learning potential. And I believe that every child has a learning potential and it's ours to unlock, regardless of zip code. And so what we do at Dreambox is we believe that every child should have a high quality, very engaging, and highly personalized learning experience. We believe that's an essential mixture, ingredient, to try to unlock their learning potential. And we use an intelligent adaptive learning technology that was cultivated over 3 years. And we use that in schools across 48 states, across the United States, Canada, and we delivered about 44 million lessons last year. So think about pre-K through 6 kids learning mathematics and spending doing 44 million lessons. Kids love learning. We have to infuse the fun back into learning. So you're going to hear more from me, but I want to just show you a child that gives you an idea about the experience that we're talking about. Can you run that?
New one, too. You are a true math master. Good luck on your learning adventure.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I get to do a whole new Dreambox adventure, Dad.
Cool.
A whole new Dreambox adventure. Look, I can't wait to do a whole new Dreambox adventure.
Welcome to Dreambox Learning. There's a lot to learn and tons of new stuff to discover. Click units like this one to start playing. And look for the ones with coins. Those are chosen especially for you. And you'll earn more coins.
Okay.
When you're playing lessons, click this speaker to hear the question out loud. What is 1/4 of a dollar?
1/4 of a dollar.
And if you need to get out of a lesson to choose something else, click this button right here.
Okay.
Let's try doubling with bigger numbers.
Oh, big numbers. Okay.
Here's a problem to solve.
20 times.
What's the product? Type the product in the problem and then
Well,
click
10
OK.
times 30 is 300.
Okay.
20 times 30 would be 600 then, I think.
All right.
I'll try that. Correct. Oh, cool.
Here's a problem to solve. Type the product in the problem and then click OK.
7, 8, 9, 10 times 80. That's 800. 880. 960. I think it's 960. Why aren't you pushing the red button?
So a couple things to note. No pencil. He's demonstrating a conceptual understanding of mathematics because he is in a safe environment to explore and to show his curiosity and to try different ways to solve different problems. This is a kid who loves math. He's 4 years old. 4 years old. So you're going to hear more from me. I don't want to take more time now, but you're going to hear more about the ingredients that we put together with the curriculum, the engaging learning environment that we borrow from gaming, and most importantly, the intelligent adaptive engine that collects about 50,000 data points per student per hour to create this engaging environment that you just saw.
Do you want to show those slides now? We have them teed up for you.
Okay.
Yeah, why don't we just allow
So,
you to do that?
so those are the 3 elements. I won't spend more time. I can talk about it later. But here is, so what is, you're hearing a lot of people talk about adaptive technologies. Well, what you're going to see here in this, for those in the back, I apologize. There are 2 students here, second graders. One's in red and one's in purple. You're going to see them going up and back. They're progressing. They're actually progressing through the Dreambox curriculum. And you would say, well, why are they going back? Well, Dreambox gives instantaneous real-time feedback to test whether or not they actually have demonstrated mastery of mathematical concepts. And when that student can't demonstrate that, they're taken back to the curriculum, earlier in the curriculum, so that they don't get frustrated. They stay in that proximal zone of development. They don't get too frustrated, and they go back to where they need to go to have a chance to be reintroduced to the material and to master it again before they proceed. So imagine a winter break or summer break, and they lose a little bit of what they learned. Dreambox ascertains that really quickly, and before they're frustrated, takes them back to the appropriate point in the lesson where they need to be, all in partnership with the teacher.
Great. Thank you. Wendy? Yes.
Okay, great. So I wanted to give you a little bit of context first. What really inspired me about the Museum of Modern Art was knowing that it was founded by 3 incredibly feisty women. They were women, it was Abby Aldrich Rockefeller, Lily Bliss, and Mary Sullivan. And Mary Sullivan was an artist and somebody who was really interested in what art might do for returning veterans from the First World War. They founded it in 1929 with the spirit of really feeling that they wanted to share what groundbreaking artists were doing, artists who pushed the boundaries, who questioned, and who did things that were daring and disruptive. And they felt that that should be something that everybody should enjoy and understand. And so they founded the museum with a Regents Charter, an educational charter, first to be a place where people would enjoy and understand modern and contemporary art, but then secondarily to be the best museum of modern art in the world. And they hired a first director who really conceived of the museum as a laboratory. And it wasn't just painting and sculpture. He included design and architecture and film and photography as part of that mix. And it's that kind of sense of what if that's really inspired us to continue to think about how to continue that educational mission. So what my team and I have asked is, what if we collaborated with a group of artists and designers to create a space that wasn't just about gazing at works of art, but a place that invited a community of people to come together to explore their own creativity? This is actually a rug that was made by Fritz Hag, an artist who helped, and everybody could participate in the making of that. And what if you could bring together those art-loving outlier teens from all 5 boroughs and bring them together not only to learn from the museum's collections, but to learn from the city and artists, and to see the city as part of that classroom. And what if you ask those teens, how could you bring this to a larger group of global teens who care about the same things that you care about by having them help you develop the first online course for teens? And what if the classroom could be your runway? And what if, have any of you brought small children to a museum before? Do you know what that shelf life is like? You can't touch anything. But what you really want to do is touch and run and express all of the joy that you have. So what do? You create a great space for kids to do what Marcel Duchamp would say is most important to artists: to play, to discover, to fail, to make, to tell stories. And you make it a place where not just kids want to play, but everybody wants to play. And then you use that as your laboratory, and you do research that informs this, an award-winning app that allows people of all ages to learn about art, but to experiment with those processes. And you can post your work everywhere. So that's just a touch of what we do. I'd also say, what if you looked at teachers and teaching as the most creative profession, and you thought of the museum as a place not just for a field trip, but a relationship over a lifetime, where you discover your own creativity, where art isn't just about objects, but it's about stimulating your ability to think and probe and push beyond and add to a larger conversation of what could be.
Thank you, Wendy.
I don't have any slides.
Nope, no slides. John has a taste of
We just don't have that much design power yet.
Yeah.
We can help.
It's like, we need all the help we can get. So I'm going to share with you what I think are 2 fairly momentous and seemingly competitive forces taking place in education. And we see them every single day right now in Los Angeles. I mean, the first is the Common Core state standards and that movement across this country. We are one of the 45 states that is within the next year totally redesigning and adopting an entire new set of standards that we will teach to in English language arts and math, which we're rolling out, and then science and social studies. And this isn't going to be a big lecture about that piece, but these are much, much, much more rigorous standards. These are about fewer, much deeper topics, helping individuals master the art of kind of very close reading of nonfiction text, and a shift in mathematics from function, which has been what we've mostly done in this country, with deep notion of concept. So we do very little math concept, like number sense as a concept, but we spend a lot of time on addition. So, or subtraction. So this notion of having that take place is huge, these standards. And then the second force is customization. So students and schools and parents want a deeply customized learning experience against a common set of standards, seemingly problematic. And I think that's where this conversation has emerged and is emerging very quickly around the bridging solution sets for students. I'm going to give you 4 very small pieces which will thread a conversation through. One piece is you're in a different world when not 1 or 2, but dozens and dozens and dozens. Now my scale is big. We've got 45,000 high school students, but dozens and dozens and dozens of students are walking into their guidance council office and saying, okay, I'll take my transcript now. I haven't gone to school yet. And it's like, what are you talking about? Well, these courses I took online at Stanford, these courses I took online at Harvard, I took this at MIT. These courses are all certified, I've passed them all, I've customized my own diploma, I'm ready to go on to college. And people looking like, we don't have that course number in this high school piece. And there's a real collision at the moment of students who have completely walked in fully legitimate with courses that we wouldn't even offer. As a completely customized diploma. It doesn't even square with the state of California, let alone a bureaucracy like LAUSD. That's fascinating, as students are saying, well, you actually don't offer anything I want. I'm actually going to go get these on my own, and they're offered at institutions at a much higher level of rigor than you're providing here. Second piece, we're just undertaking, I think is fairly historic. We're going to provide technology to every single student and adult in the form of a tablet with complete content loaded into that. I knew something was very different because we tested these out in sessions as we went through the bidding process with kindergartners, 5th graders, high schools, and we observed these tests. When a kid in the 2nd grade walked in and we put down a textbook and we put down the tablet and the student was trying to open the textbook top. What we've realized around this point is that students are coming to school en masse, not knowing their content, but being 2 generations ahead of the teachers who know the content in the facility around the technology. And so how are we going to bridge the ability to impart content in a way that we don't currently have the facility for to students who have the facility but don't know how to apply the content? Big issue. Third, we've opened 135 schools in the past 5 years, brand new schools in Los Angeles, and that's about 400 individual schools because each one has multiple campuses. We opened several 100% paperless schools. There is no paper to be found in any form whatsoever. So when you visit the schools, you can be amazed by, as you might imagine, how well this all works. I mean, you've got teachers who are doing flash mobs for tutorials. It is actually astonishing. However, the problem that has emerged is that we only know how to grade your paper on paper. We don't know how to grade actually collective content. So multiple students creating collective product, it's really, really a new dilemma for us around that. Who owns the grade? How do you assign stuff that is completely created together and that's virtual? So that's a piece for us. And then lastly, when you talk about design to even the most intractable pressing problems like poverty, we made a move to feed every single student breakfast. And we were going to do it in the classroom because that's where we captured them. And literally, and I would say this because my profoundly respected colleague Linda Resnick was here, we are doing like we normally did. We were kind of walking and giving you the food. And she's like, what are you talking about? And brought a company together that redesigned how the food would be given to the student in ways that I could never have imagined that would make such a big deal. And you had a gigantic spike in consumption, you had a gigantic spike in attendance, you had a huge drop in nurses' visits. And it wasn't so much that they had breakfast, it was what they learned, the tray, the packaging, the product. I just would never have thought that would have been a part of the ability to bridge something like simply giving food to 155,000 students every single morning in our pilot who are hungry, and now we're going to go to 800,000. But the way we did that was far more important than actually giving the food. It's kind of 4 examples that we're working through at the moment.
Fantastic, thank you. Sandy?
Yes. Slides. Great. So I'm Sandy Spiker, and I work at a company called IDEO. And IDEO is a design and innovation company. And we have a human-centered process that we apply to challenges in many sectors, and I focus on applying this process to challenges in the education sector. And at its core, our design process is really about understanding people, what they really care about, what motivates them, how they behave in the world, how they like to interact in the world, and then imagining solutions from there. And as you can see by this diagram, we also then really quickly base what we can understand about what's desirable for people to what's going to be viable and what's going to be technically feasible. So we're designing on many different levels and dimensions. What that really translates into in experience means that we look at things like this, or things like this, or things like this. This is, like, by the way, my favorite image of all time, and I'm not exactly sure why. But every time I see this image, I think, like, what other president would you do this for? And then it's a really fun brainstorm, like, would Roosevelt fit in there? And then it's a little bit like, which one? But anyway, I mean, all of these images start to show really what our time is about. And I love the stories that you just shared, John, because I think that really shows how differently people are interacting in the world and how that sets their expectation for experiences. So we look at people and the ways that they're interacting in order to design experiences for them. In education, there's a huge range of challenges that we're then applying that process to. Very specific things like redesigning that desk chair that you sat in for so many hours uncomfortably in higher education classrooms. This is the node chair that we did with Steelcase, and if any of you have been through the learning lab that's in the main building, Pepke, thanks, Christine. Some of the node chairs are in there, and you can see, and it's been redesigned for modern times to really suggest a more active classroom, to have space to put your stuff so you can move around more easily, because there's all these kind of cues that were sent to kind of stay fixed and not really fluid in the way people want to be learning. We're also applying this process to context of learning environments, and I think that word historically we really think of as spaces, but actually there are learning environments in many different dimensions these days. Obviously, yes, spaces, but also online, also in tablets. This example is a tablet experience that's sort of everything in your backpack, actually now in a tablet, and how do you design that in a way that kids today are interacting? We're also applying this process to, I would say, pretty complex questions now, looking at holistic systems. We've been spending the past couple of years working with an organization in Peru to design a school model that is affordable, scalable, and excellent. So how do we help the rising middle class get an international quality education and do that at an affordable price and a big enough scale that it's going to make an impact in the country? And that means our design process, which I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more about through the panel, is really about understanding people in order to design the whole system. So the academic model, the way that the classrooms and the campuses are structured, the way the schedule is structured, the way the role of the teacher is designed, how we create supports for that teacher, and how we actually design the financial and operational plan that allow this to all exist, because all of this is aspects of what we design when we're designing schools. We also actually are taking that even up another level, looking at national strategies. We're doing a lot of work with national organizations. This image here in particular is some work we just did with Digital Promise. And I know this image is a very odd one to put on a display such as this, but the challenge that we were helping to look at with Digital Promise and the League of Innovative Schools was how might we redesign our approach to procurement in districts? Because as we're looking at all of these new technologies and these new possibilities, we actually have a lot of policy and structural limitations to actually bringing that stuff into schools, trying it out, and learning from it. So this visual here is actually a picture that a superintendent drew about the perception of how the education system works. And essentially, we have entrepreneurs on one side developing stuff, and we have the students and teachers on the other side that are using it. And it is a giant mountain with procurement at the top of it, and all of these boulders, which are perceived as the district along the way. So anyway, that's the interesting mental model of how procurement is perceived through the eyes of one very deeply embedded person in it. What do you think, John?
I think it's
Are you guys the
100%
boulder?
accurate.
100%. I like that we've got researchers and funders shining light on the whole situation and
I'm
kind
just
of
concerned about the
watching
scale.
them.
The boulders seem much smaller than they really
You
are.
have a large district, this smaller district. So the core of what I think we're bringing to the table is really that great experiences are designed from people, from understanding people, understanding how they engage in the world and what they really care about. So in case I didn't make it sticky enough at the beginning, it means look at things like this as we're answering questions like this.
Thank you, Sandy. And a great way for us to start the conversation with our panelists, because again, design thinking is really about empathy of the end user. Really thinking about what is the need of the individual that can be scaled to meet the needs of the masses. And it's just not the approach that we typically take in education. It's really about one size fits all. And so I think there is a theme around customizing and personalizing experience that meets students where they are, that allows teachers to soar with their strengths, for parents to be engaged in the right way, for funders to be engaged in the right way, but to really be centered in this human-centered design principle that I think you saw lots of different examples from each of our panelists. And so I do think it's not a solution, it's a series of solutions. And I want to kind of keep probing on how you've leveraged design thinking in your particular area of education to push on student achievement, again, where you've seen it working and where it's not working, so that we can have a conversation as we leave this room about what to stop doing as well as what to continue to do more of with a sense of urgency. So let's start with you, Jesse, and keep pushing on what are hot words in education that we've heard a lot, even on today's panel, but I think throughout our time at Aspen, and it's this notion of adaptive and personalized and customized learning. What does that really mean to you, and how have you used that thinking as you develop Dreambox and, quite frankly, some of the other innovations that I know you're thinking through that you may or may not be able to share with this group, but we'd love to push you on that.
So one of the challenges in education is that we like terms and acronyms, yet people, they mean different things to different people. I mean, how many people have heard the term adaptive, right? How many people think they actually know what that means, right? So it means different things for different people. So in Dreambox, we want to make sure that we go beyond, is a child getting it right? What is that child likely to do in the future? Predictive analytics. We actually want to capture how a child is thinking, to give us insight into what they know and what they don't know. So we've designed a series of virtual manipulatives so kids can actually demonstrate and show their work. So we don't have to guess why they got something wrong. So if we ask a child to build a number and they use a series of ones on a virtual number math rack, and another child demonstrates effective grouping strategies and they can solve that problem more efficiently, then should those two children have the next same lesson? So what we've done with intelligent adaptive learning is we've developed adaptivity both within the lesson, so it's real-time, instantaneous, continuous feedback that modifies what that child sees instantaneously, as well as inter-lesson adaptivity. So what's the next lesson they should get based on what they did in the current lesson? This is built on a technology that exists today that I think changes the paradigm for learning and learning possibilities. So how many of us have used these technologies at Amazon or Netflix, and they suggest things to you that they know you might like, right? Because these are technologies that get to know the user through use. We've brought that to Dreambox. So Dreambox is a technology that actually learns the learner as the learner learns. And because of that, we can make sure that child is never bored, never frustrated, and is always in the precise place in the learning progression that they should. So why does this matter? 50,000 data points, who cares? Adaptivity, who cares? Why it matters is because we're seeing amazing results, dramatic results from kids that people think can't learn or won't learn. I'm doing the best with what I have.
Talk a bit about some of the successes that you've seen in the results.
Yeah, so there's a school in West Seattle. It's called West Seattle Elementary. It's 98% free and reduced lunch. I think they speak 37 languages there. And they failed their adequate yearly progress for 3 straight years, had a change in building level administration, and felt like they were doing the best with what they had. We had a dynamic principal who said, in a very low-risk environment, right? You're coming in after a lot of failure. She said, I'm going to try this Dreambox thing. And she put it in after-school programs for 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. And in 6 months, these kids outperformed their more affluent counterparts. It was actually outperformed the district average, too, by 2.5 times on their state assessment in 6 months. She didn't even expect that. And so what is possible now with data, with relevant data that you can use instantaneously that can impact learning at the point of instruction, not in the rearview mirror. This is what happened yesterday, this is what we're going to do tomorrow. It changes instantaneously so that you maximize and you optimize learning. There are a lot of data points that I can share with you, but the enthusiasm shouldn't be limited to Dreambox Learning. It's about a new paradigm of learning that's now possible because of this emergence of this new kind of technology.
She has some fans, and you should. She's brilliant. And working on some new really interesting innovations that I can't completely get her to tell me everything about. Working on it.
Well, let me just say this on that, because you're pressing me. These technologies that are being developed were not developed to be limited to one discipline.
Indeed.
Okay?
Indeed.
So think about learning. Think about phonemic awareness, letter recognition. Is that child hearing a short A or a long A? Think about science. Think about so many things that can be enabled with real-time, instantaneous, personalized learning. So these are kids that are going to be architecting their own learning path proactively just by solving problems. And we can capture that now.
Which is exciting, and data certainly matters. And in fact, we were having a dialogue earlier this morning before you all joined us, in fact, Jesse, Wendy, and I, about the power of data. And so perhaps, Wendy, you could push a bit on how you've been able to leverage data to capture insights that is informing the learning experience, particularly in the K-12 space in the museum.
Absolutely. One of the things that we've done is actually put research into everything that we do. So we actually, within the education department, we have somebody who does qualitative research and is out there working with our staff every day to kind of ask questions. And as Anna DeVere Smith said, what makes great artists is having a great ear. And I would say not only having a great ear to really listen to what people are thinking and doing and what they really want, but also to have a great eye. So really observing as well and defining that eye. A lot of what we do, I think there's a real shift in museums in the 21st century and also libraries, because in the digital age, images are ubiquitous. You can download and see many different images of, say, Starry Night. So what is the reason that you might want to come to a museum? And I really feel that a museum needs to have a greater civic responsibility and be a place where, as people learn over a lifetime, we know that the 21st century, you're not going to have one career and be one person, but have many identities over a lifetime. And so a museum can be a place that stimulates your creativity. And I think artists are really people who push us to think differently. I think also thinking of a museum, Brian Eno has this great quote that we should stop thinking about art as being just objects, but as stimulators of other people's creativity. And I think that we need to think about museums as those kinds of places where you're having really important conversations. Yesterday, I missed a really great thing that was going on at the museum. One of those lab spaces or studio spaces that we created by a young artist who's very interested in different kinds of economies and exchange. She created something called the Exchange Cafe that was an entire space that people could drop into. She invited 3 different socially engaged groups to create or to provide tea, the Feral Tea Company that actually moves, people bring tea from different places. They're traveling and bring it to the company from around the world. Milk Nut Jails, that's really involved in providing milk as as a kind of a protest of the incarceration system in upstate New York, and beekeeping as well. And so what you would have to do is actually think about what you had to exchange, not money, but what you have, your skills to exchange for some of those things. And it was an interesting way of thinking about it. They had a big ice cream social and talked about a lot of these issues that are really important issues for us today. So I think using data, so really understanding what people want to learn and using that as part of your process all the time, but also thinking more broadly about how you do what you do and how to engage, how to work that into both all of your programs as you're kind of thinking about them.
Thank you. I'm intrigued by your comment about students helping to create solutions and leveraging data in that way. And John, intrigued to hear you talk about the students in your district who are creating their own educational experience, their own curriculum, their own path to graduation. And technology is certainly somewhat of an enabler of that. So talk to us a bit about where you see students pushing our adoption of technology as a solution and where they're designing changes to the system that perhaps we're not even ready for or not thinking about. So as you listen to students, what do you think is next in terms of that evolution?
Yeah, I actually think this is going to be as powerful as when student voice was actually elevated in our middle late 60s, early 70s as a transformation about how the university was actually going to respond to me as a student. That's going to happen now in middle schools and high schools for sure. So what's very interesting is I was listening to my colleague talk about how this West Seattle school, this whole program that was profoundly successful and engaging was taking place after school. We tend to watch that also. No one wants to go to the classroom anymore. They actually want to go to the place where their learning is much more accelerated, deeply personal, and much more engaging. So you can go to the remediation or you can go to the lesson. And so the notion of students who are shaping the learning is a very, very big issue. And what we kind of saw this in the world of special education, adaptive, has been blown away at this point in terms of total education around this piece. So I think we watched a couple of iterations of this. One is student product and work. So students are publishing books like there's no tomorrow. Students are creating music like there's no tomorrow. Students are creating dilemmas to be solved. I mean, the whole genetically modified crop issue is a very big issue. I mean, it is part of the world of California, it's part of the Central Valley, it's part of the kind of social responsibility issues around that. So the textbook doesn't come close to sufficing anymore. And so they're not using it and want nothing to do with that, which is leaving those who are at 1.5 generation of instruction in a very, very difficult place. Say all that to talk about where we're watching some of the coolest activities is where teachers are having groups of students react to, here's how my lesson is going to look for the next 6 weeks. And I can do this, or I could do this, and then students are reacting to, this is what I'm going to need from you if I'm going to be engaged and I'm going to actually get my A through G.
So real collaboration between the teacher as content provider and the student is somewhat of a content provider as well then.
Right, so the students have a facility around the technology that the teacher doesn't. The teacher, of course, has the facility around the content that the student does not around that. This notion that I'm just going to deliver this to you is just not working. So we started with public choice, where you have multiple schools you can go to, and then we had choice in the form of charters. Now we want choice in the form of lessons. And that is very viral, and it's very easy to send around.
Talk about the power dynamic there. If I'm accustomed to being the teacher who is the expert and I present to you and then you respond, I mean, how is that working practically?
With stress. With stress, because what we want to shift the power to is that the power is actually in learning and then demonstrating knowledge against ill-defined, complex problems. That's the power, if you can do that. And so the traditional structures are just simply not working for folks. And students are moving, but with their feet, to places that are making that need served. And it is not necessarily what we might think. This is not necessarily about schools in the most difficult to serve populations. This is across the entire, some of the most traditional and entrenched stuff are in these very kind of what we call high-powered communities, because there is the concept that that's what I need to get to Stanford, that's what I need to get to Yale, Harvard, or any of the other highly competitive pieces. And what we're finding, of course, is that they're leaving those schools. And so the notion of power in the next round for students is going to be in, I need to tell you what you need to do for me to learn, as opposed to, I'm going to tell you the content and you tell me if you know it. And technology is moving that much faster than we can provide the professional development for.
Great. So I'm going to ask us to do a quick lightning round before we open it up for questions. If you could ask us to think about something that blends education, technology, and design thinking in a manner that would help advance student achievement, and not in an incremental way, but in a seismic way, what would that be? Start with you, Susan.
Can you say the question again? Sorry.
So again, if you could share with us something that you would want us to think about, there is a sphere of influence in this room.
Yeah.
So not for us just to think about, hear about, but actually do when we leave this room.
Yeah.
That would really blend ed, technology, design thinking to do something, again, that would not make incremental change, but seismic change.
Yeah.
What would you want to leave us thinking about and then hopefully being able to do something about?
Yeah. So one of the things that we're looking at a lot is actually the way that we design our spaces and schedules to suggest how activities should happen. So right now, even when schools are bringing in technology, using a lot of these very innovative methods, even using that data, giving it feedback to students, it still often happens in age-based groupings in 30 kids with one teacher. And so one of the big questions that I have is, how might we rethink that structure given how time has changed? So given how our technologies, given how our possibilities, given how our learners have changed. And so what walls might we take down? What new ways might we use time? And what new roles might we create to actually sort of disaggregate this formal experience that we've created that's sort of losing relevance?
That's great.
I'm very struck by the what I think is going to be a very rapid reconceptualization of higher education and the academy, but particularly for youth and families in poverty. So in many ways, they are accessing without going. And so once we get like MOOC U up and running, and then students are actually owning the knowledge base that you would have had to pay $50,000 or $60,000 a year for nothing in their junior year. How do we take that and really upend the notions that you can move out of poverty much, much, much quicker through an access that we had not thought about? So I think this notion that K-12 education, that idea that's gone, it's not K-12 any longer. And what does that mean for monetizing the way that we thought about this? And that is a very, very, very big issue for our communities in poverty, and an awesome opportunity.
So you'll be on the committee leading that conversation, right?
The kids are already there.
Yeah.
We're late to the table.
But the adults aren't.
Yeah.
Right. Wendy?
I'm still thinking about the physical space of the classroom and how it needs to change in the digital age. And if we are moving to these new modes, what does that space need to look like? And I'm wondering whether designers and artists and architects could be part of a larger conversation about what that might look like, and also how the cultural resources of the city might be a greater part of the ecosystem of learning. Mm-hmm. So whether it's online or in the physical space of these places of culture.
That's great.
I think the only thing I would add is that I would love to see the obliteration of the wall between formal, structured learning that we tend to think of in a traditional classroom and less formal, less structured learning that happens all the time. And I think one of the things we have to do is stop talking about education system reform and to really think about learning. You know, where does learning happen? Under what conditions is it optimized? And then try to take that wisdom to the more formal, structured learning environment. Because we will always have a custodial need, no matter what we think. There's always going to be a place for that. Let's not forget that. So what can we do to bring these two worlds together and leverage technologies like the cloud that will make those connections permanent. We have an opportunity to have technologies that have unlimited data, permanent memory, and infinite patience. How can we design learning environments and experiences so that it's not what happens after school and summer school or 30 minutes before you go to the dentist that's different than what happens in a classroom? Because if it's productive learning, do we really care? Do we really care?
Can I give you an example that is happening in real time? So we all know about public schools, and we all know that you take the state test. And within 2 or 3 years, the state test will be a daily event. Yes. And you will just take the assessment until you master it, and it will respond to you. This is actually happening, and it will be different every day. The format of that, and you will take that, and some students will pass that in October, and others are going to pass that in November, and others are going to pass that in June, and it's going to be a constant event. The implication for instruction on that is monumental.
Can I build on that just because what John is talking about is something I struggle with putting a label on, which is we all are familiar with summative assessments, right? And we think about, end of year or state tests, summative. But what happens if and we all know that formative assessments are better, right? What happens if we can make instruction formative? That is at our fingertips right now. We can make every moment meaningful and every moment different for every student based on where they are at that moment. Because we have a chance to have formative instruction now because of these technologies. And in the hands of great teachers, imagine what's possible. So if a teacher, even a great teacher, imagine your best teacher you've ever had in your life, and imagine that teacher seeing a 55 to 60% increase in the number of students in her classroom. Can that teacher deliver personalized learning in that environment, even that best teacher? There's just no way. So what can we do to bring down the walls between technology and live instruction, between informal and formal, so that we're actually just talking about optimizing learning and making it engaging and relevant and personalized? That is not a futuristic notion. That is happening right now, every day, and people just don't know about it. We have to figure out a way to scale it so that people like John will know what is possible for him to support the bold vision that he has for LA Unified.
So I'm going to open it up for questions. So while we're getting ready for the first question,
I
quick
would just love
comment?
to build on that.
Please,
which is,
absolutely.
I think a key consideration is this, while we can conceptualize it and create experiments that actually help us learn from this, we also have to consider the readiness that people have for change. And for a lot of parents, it's incredibly difficult to see education happen in a really different way than they experienced. And it's like we're in a transitional phase now. There are a lot of moments where we can see these great things happening, but we have to take time and include a lot of different stakeholders.
A common language and a common behaviors to bring people along will certainly be really important. First question?
Hi, I'm Sean Degoni Clark, Director of Academic Technology at Riverdale Country School. My question's for Jesse. So first, just to preface this, I believe in the kind of change that you're talking about here, but I'm also aware of a real reticence on the part of teachers to believe in it. I'm wondering what you say to them. How do you set their minds at ease that this will actually be an improvement?
So this is what I spend the vast majority of my time doing, and I appreciate the question. We have to figure out a way to de-risk innovation. We have to figure out a way to de-risk a move to something that's different and potentially better. Because right now, people feel like their jobs are at stake. And I think that we have a unique opportunity. So what I tell them is this. I tell them two things. One is that we will provide you a risk-free opportunity to try it out. We have free trials. Try it out. But what we encourage people to do is to really look at the data. And we invite the most skeptical teachers and parents to the table. And when they see the data from their children, in their environment, with their leadership, in their context, and they see dramatic improvements, they don't think it's an experiment anymore. So what we have to do is figure out a way to scale de-risking innovation. We do this every day at Dreambox. We have to figure out a way to do it in the learning community. And so I tell them that.
I don't want to give a smart aleck response, but this is, I think, really part of this. If change makes us uncomfortable, we're going to be really uncomfortable at irrelevance.
Amen.
And
Amen.
I actually think that's a very significant point. I mean, it's moving. It's moving away so quickly we're not able to grasp it.
Change is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. Question?
Hi, I'm Susan Chapman Hughes. I actually run global real estate and workplace enablement for American Express. And what's fascinating about this conversation for me is this is the exact same conversation we're having about transforming the corporate workplace. Mm-hmm. What's interesting to me is that it seems as though there's all these parallel paths going on, but nobody's having a conversation across the board. And when I think about kind of the barriers to moving with scale, because I think the ideas that you have are all wonderful, but how do you get past the union? How do you get past the crumbling infrastructure? How do you get past the city councils who, to your point, have change management issues like crazy, who have re-election issues like crazy, and who, like, what is the thing that's going to cause the game changer to force this stuff to the confluence to come together to make this happen?
John, maybe I'll ask you to jump in on that.
Two things. One is just keep moving. I mean, just move on as many fronts as possible. It's anchored in a very social justice, civil rights issue, and if you move fast enough, they just can't stop it. The second thing, I'm being very frank. The second issue though is.
Do you need to move with you though? Because that's something that you do by yourself, or is that something you need partnership?
You're moving the system. So all those forces that you just spoke about, yes, they do want to smother and stop. But the second issue is very real. The kids are going away. You know, we'll be, LA Unified eventually be teaching 9 kids. It'll be the last 9, because everybody else has gone to choice, and so be it. We want to actually be the choice that's enticing. And that is there's like no question about that. So just in my 3 years as superintendent, we began with 86,000 students in charter schools. There's 119,000 2.5 years later. Now, we're authorizing them. Parents get that right. That's the law. Eventually, you get where this is going to go if we don't think through that.
Next question.
I agree that technology is the way, and personalization of education is what's going to happen. But I wonder what's going to happen. You know, are we teaching grit to our kids then? Are we teaching resilience? What happens to all those character building things that when you're not sitting in the classroom and waiting for the next kid to ask their question and you already know, but I mean certain patience or empathy, or how do we sort of put that into the conversation?
I can talk a little bit about that, actually. So in this work that we've been doing in Peru, designing a school model, as we went to this sort of autonomous learning mode where kids are using technology, we actually paired that with, so our sort of story for blended learning, we paired that with constructivist-based group learning curriculum, so that the autonomy pairs with the kind of provocations they're getting in more of project-based frames. And then we also added into that an innovation program, so that specifically actually with under the mission to build future leaders for the country. And so the idea was to say every quarter, every year, depending on how fast we can implement it, is a look at your community under a certain challenge and say, how can you actually improve the community around you? So you're actually nurturing those skills of empathy and connection at the same time. I actually don't think they're opposing forces. I think they're different modalities. And I don't think anybody's making the point that everyone's going to sit on a computer for 8 hours a day and learn. But it's sort of the way that we're all living and working now. We're very fluid between formats. There are so many different formats for learning, and we should actually be creating very diverse learning environments that give those provocations for all different types of learners.
Great point. Final question.
Gene Koo, Executive Director of iCivics, and when our organization was founded by Sandra Day O'Connor to teach young people about how our government works, we faced this strategic question: do we reach out to kids directly, or do we go through schools? And we eventually decided we're going through schools. And from a design perspective, I'm just curious, from your experience, have you found there to be a difference between designing for learning and designing for teaching, and what that difference might be, and whether that might be an answer to some of the questions that seem to be here about the resistance, and if we're designing more for teachers, whether that might help?
So 2 points on that. The first is that when we first began the design for Dreambox, we asked master teachers to come out of the classroom, basically on a sabbatical. We sat them down next to engineers, and we said, collaborate. There was a lot of benevolent friction. And we said, build...
I love that word, by the way. That is a keeper. When we first met with you, benevolent friction.
And we said, build something that these teachers would be honored to use in their classroom. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is that we think we do a pretty good job, but we subject our best thinking to kids. So an example, we developed a virtual manipulative and we had a progress meter that was about an inch on the bottom of the screen because we didn't want kids to look over and see somebody was progressing more quickly or more slowly than their neighbor. And so we took it out to testing and the kids said, "Why is this so small?" And we said, "Well, you know, we want to respect you." And we went, "I want it to be big." That progress meter, and it kept on going back and back and back to user testing. It is this high, it's this full length of the screen because they don't care. These are kids that say, think about it. What do they put on social media? They have a very different view of sharing information about themselves. And I have a pretty young staff, and we still got it wrong. So it's an iterative process, just like learning is iterative. And getting back to the earlier question, we created an environment where the first step to getting something right might be to get it wrong. And we borrowed that from the gaming environment. So the worlds are coming together, and it's okay to learn from your mistakes. They're going to have to do that when they go and work and when they collaborate in high school and middle school. So why not incorporate that into the design of the innovation?
And that is the premise of design thinking, right? It is about getting insights. It's about prototyping very quickly, failing fast, course correcting, and moving forward to find solutions that are iterative. So I think it's with that backdrop that I hope we all are bold enough to be innovative, to fail and fail fast, and to iterate and find solutions that will bring change to the education system in this country with a sense of urgency that it demands. To our panelists, one, thank you. And thank you.